The screaming ripped through the afternoon quiet, sharp and raw. It was followed by a yelp of pain, then the hurried, hushed voices of my son, David, and his wife, Sarah. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when 10-year-old Timmy, my grandson, bolted past me, clutching a steaming kettle. He tripped, and the boiling water arced through the air, splashing directly onto my arm and side. The shock was immediate, searing. I cried out, stumbling back against the counter. But it wasn't the burn that froze me, it was what came next. David and Sarah rushed in, not to me, but to Timmy. "Are you okay, champ?" Sarah asked, pulling him into a hug. David glared at me, eyes narrowed. "Mom, watch where you're standing. He's just a kid." Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not. Until that day, I had lived with them, offering support, comfort, and increasingly, financial assistance, believing I was helping my son build a stable life. But what I discovered next would force me to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. My name is Eleanor. I was a widow of 5 years, living comfortably but not extravagantly on my late husband's pension and the modest income from some investments he'd carefully managed. After his death, the large house felt too empty, and when David and Sarah suggested I move in with them, citing Timmy would love having grandma around and they could help look after me as I aged, it seemed like a natural, loving progression. I sold my house, a place filled with decades of memories, and moved into their much smaller, already crowded home. The bulk of the proceeds from the sale, after buying a small annuity, went into a separate account, intended as a safety net and perhaps a future nest egg for Timmy's education. I also kept a smaller sum accessible for daily expenses and contributing to the household. Initially, it was fine. I helped with Timmy, cooked meals, and contributed generously to groceries and bills. But gradually, the requests for money became more frequent and less like requests, more like demands. David lost his job and seemed in no hurry to find another, spending his days tinkering in the garage or watching television. Sarah worked part-time, but complained constantly about their finances. My contributions increased from covering groceries to paying utilities, then the mortgage payment, and occasionally bailing them out of what they called unexpected emergencies, car repairs that seemed suspiciously frequent, sudden medical bills, or needing new electronics. I depleted my accessible fund faster than I expected, but they always had a reason, a story, a promise to pay me back. When things turn around, my safety net account remained untouched, a line I felt I needed to hold. They knew about it, of course. It had come up in conversations about my future care, and they had subtly but persistently hinted that having access to it would make things so much easier for everyone. I loved my son and grandson, despite the growing unease. I told myself they were struggling, that family helped each other. Sarah could be sharp-tongued and David passive-aggressive, but I attributed it to stress. I missed my old life, my own space, but I pushed the feeling down. After all, they were family. This is what you did for family. Their home was chaotic, often messy, and the boundaries I was used to evaporated. My privacy was minimal, my belongings often shifted or borrowed without asking. I tried to talk to David about boundaries, about their spending, but he would shut down or become defensive, saying I didn't understand their pressures. Sarah would sigh dramatically and talk about how hard they worked and how little they had. The guilt trips were frequent and effective. It's just hard when we're scraping by and you have resources, Sarah had said pointedly one evening. The incident with the boiling water was the cruel, hot shock that shattered the illusion. Lying on the sofa later, arm throbbing despite the makeshift bandaging Sarah had applied somewhat begrudgingly after 20 minutes of fussing over Timmy, I replayed the scene. It wasn't just their words, it was the look in their eyes. A flicker of annoyance that I was hurt, an obstacle, a problem rather than a person in pain. He's just a kid. Was that supposed to excuse potentially serious injury? Was my safety truly so unimportant compared to avoiding mildly scolding a 10-year-old? The dismissiveness felt calculated, a continuation of the way they minimized my needs, my concerns, my contributions, always framing their own struggles as paramount. As the initial shock faded, replaced by a deep, aching hurt that went beyond the burn, a cold clarity began to set in. My son and daughter-in-law didn't see me as a beloved mother or a valuable member of their household. They saw me as a source of funds, a resource to be managed and exploited. The burn was accidental, perhaps, but their reaction was deliberate. It highlighted a complete lack of respect, a stunning level of entitlement. Lying there, unable to sleep due to the pain and the churning in my gut, I started thinking about the missing $20 from my purse, the frequent loans they never repaid, the way they subtly steered conversations towards my finances. I remembered overhearing Sarah on the phone weeks ago, complaining about me being stubborn about her money at the time. I dismissed it as a misunderstanding. Now it sounded ominous. My arm healed slowly, leaving a faint scar, but the emotional wound deepened daily. They never apologized for their reaction, never truly acknowledged the pain I was in. Life resumed its pattern, the casual demands, the veiled complaints about money, the subtle pressure. But something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer just a passive resident helping out. I was a woman who had been hurt, dismissed, and was starting to suspect she was being actively manipulated. The first step was quiet observation. I started paying closer attention. I noticed how Sarah would deliberately leave bills lying around my living area, highlighted with notes like urgent. I saw David looking through my mail one afternoon when he thought I wasn't looking. I started discreetly checking my bank statements online, something I usually only did monthly. Small discrepancies appeared, minor withdrawals I didn't recall making, service fees that seemed high. They were small, easily explained away individually, but together, they formed a pattern. My accessible fund was dwindling faster than even my increased contributions explained. Then came the more concrete discoveries. One afternoon, looking for a book in a shared shelf in the living room, I found a folder tucked behind some old magazines. It wasn't mine. Inside were printouts of my bank statements, highlighted sections noting large transfers or the current balance. There were also notes in Sarah's handwriting: account balance decreasing, ask mom for amount, need access to savings soon. My heart pounded. This wasn't just tracking my money, this was strategizing how to get it. A few days later, still shaken, I found another alarming document, a pamphlet from a legal service discussing elder guardianship. Sarah had circled sections about managing finances and medical decisions for aging relatives. Next to it was a handwritten note: discuss competence assessment. My blood ran cold. Competence assessment? Were they planning to try and declare me unable to manage my own affairs to get control of my assets, including my savings account? The idea that my own son and daughter-in-law would consider this chilled me to the bone. It was clear now, their goal wasn't just my money for their temporary needs, it was control over everything I had. I knew I couldn't stay there, not safely. But leaving required resources, and my accessible funds were almost gone. And then there was the lottery ticket. David had bought it months ago, one of those large jackpot tickets everyone was talking about. He'd left it on the kitchen counter, saying he'd check the numbers later. Days turned into weeks. It sat there, then got tucked under a pile of mail. I'd occasionally see it and remind him, and he'd wave a hand dismissively. Oh yeah, that. Probably lost anyway. Sarah had mentioned it once too, saying they couldn't afford to even dream about winning. After finding the guardianship pamphlet, I started thinking differently. I was no longer just hurt and disappointed. I was in danger, legally and financially. I needed a plan. I needed resources they couldn't touch. The lottery ticket came to mind. Where was it now? I began searching discreetly, not just for the ticket, but for anything else related to their financial state or their plans regarding me. I found it tucked inside an old cookbook Sarah rarely used. Just an impulse, a feeling I should secure it. It felt wrong, taking something that wasn't mine, but the folder of bank statements and the guardianship notes felt infinitely more wrong. I slipped the ticket into my pocket, my hand trembling. The next day, armed with copies of the bank statements they had printed, the guardianship pamphlet, and the ticket, I made my excuses about needing to visit an old friend and drove to the nearest city, far enough away that I wouldn't run into anyone they knew. My destination, a law office specializing in elder law and financial protection. Meeting with Attorney Evans was like a breath of fresh air after suffocating in their house. I laid everything out: the move, the financial pressure, the dwindling funds, the overheard conversations, the documents I'd found, the injury and their reaction, and finally, the lottery ticket. I explained my suspicion that they expected me to cash a potential winning ticket for them without question, or perhaps had even forgotten about it in their disorganization while they focused on accessing my savings. Attorney Evans listened patiently, his expression growing serious. "Mrs. Eleanor, this is a classic pattern of elder financial abuse and potential exploitation," he said gravely. "The injury, while perhaps accidental, their reaction, the access to your statements, the guardianship research, it all points to a coordinated effort to gain control of your assets. Taking the ticket, while legally ambiguous, depending on who bought it and with whose money, is a very smart move in this context. If it's a winner, it gives you the financial independence you desperately need and leverage." He advised me on securing my bank accounts immediately, changing passwords, adding alerts, even transferring the remaining balance of my accessible funds to a new account they didn't know about. He explained the process of a restraining order, if necessary, and how to initiate proceedings to formally remove myself from their household and protect my assets from any future claims or attempts at guardianship. He validated my feelings, telling me I wasn't paranoid, I was being targeted. "What about the ticket?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is it? Can I?" He took the ticket, examined it briefly. "We need to check the numbers discreetly. If it's a winner, we deposit it into a secure account in your name only immediately. That money is yours to use to protect yourself, find a new place to live, and ensure your future security. Given the circumstances, they're accessing your statements, their financial issues, the potential guardianship plot. Claiming this ticket is not just permissible. It's arguably necessary self-preservation against people who are actively trying to control and deplete your resources. We can present this as safeguarding an asset within the context of financial exploitation." Checking the ticket was tense. We went to a secure, less public lottery office with Attorney Evans present. The machine scanned it. A chime. My knees felt weak. The amount flashed on the screen. It wasn't the multi-million-dollar jackpot, but it was substantial. Substantial enough to buy a small condo outright, cover legal fees, and provide a significant cushion for years. It was, effectively, my freedom fund. Attorney Evans immediately facilitated setting up a trust account for the winnings, naming me as the sole beneficiary and transferring the funds from the Lottery Commission directly into it. He set up automatic transfers to a new personal checking account I opened simultaneously, one completely separate from my previous banking relationship they knew about. By the time I left his office that day, the bulk of the winnings were secure, legally under my control and untraceable by David and Sarah through the old channels. The remaining balance in my original savings account, the large one from the house sale, was also moved into a similarly protected account under the trust. I didn't go back to their house that night. I checked into a small, anonymous motel recommended by Attorney Evans, my heart a confusing mix of fear, relief, and profound sadness. The next morning, I hired a moving company that specialized in discreet, urgent moves. While David and Sarah were out, Sarah at work, David presumably somewhere else, I had my essential belongings packed and moved into a storage unit. I didn't take much, just clothes, photo albums, important documents, a few cherished heirlooms. The rest, the furniture I'd brought, my kitchenware, the things I'd bought for the house, I left it all. It felt symbolic. I was leaving their life, leaving behind everything connected to the manipulation and disrespect. With my things secure, my finances protected, and legal representation in place, I followed Attorney Evans's advice. I sent David and Sarah a registered letter, drafted by the attorney, stating that I had moved out permanently, was securing my assets, and would be pursuing legal options regarding the financial exploitation I had uncovered. The letter also mentioned the lottery ticket and stated it had been legally secured in my name due to the circumstances of their financial mismanagement and attempts to control my assets. It wasn't just taking the ticket, it was establishing a legal claim to it within the larger context of their actions. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Phone calls flooded my new, temporary cell number. Rage, disbelief, accusations. David yelled that I had abandoned my family, that I was selfish and crazy. Sarah shrieked about theft, about how dare I take their money, confirming my suspicion that they saw the potential winnings as rightfully theirs, despite their dismissiveness of the ticket. They threatened legal action, claiming I had stolen from them, that they would get guardianship and take everything. I didn't answer the calls. Attorney Evans had warned me this would happen and advised no direct contact. All communication was now handled through his office. The storm of calls eventually subsided, replaced by furious, rambling text messages and emails. They escalated their tactics, contacting extended family members, spreading lies that I had had a mental breakdown, stolen from them, and abandoned my poor grandson. Some family members, sadly, fell for it, sending me concerned or accusatory messages. But others, who had seen the dynamics in their house, who knew my character and their history of financial issues, were supportive, or at least reserved judgment. Attorney Evans filed the necessary paperwork. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about formally establishing that I was a competent adult who had left an exploitative situation and was taking legal steps to protect myself and my property. He included the evidence I had gathered, copies of the bank statements printed by Sarah, the guardianship pamphlet, records of money transfers I had made to them, documentation of the lottery winnings secured in my name, and even photos of the burn injury with medical notes I'd quietly obtained. We weren't just countering their accusations of theft, we were building a case showing their pattern of financial abuse, their dismissiveness of my well-being, and their intent to control my life and assets. The legal process was emotionally draining but strategically empowering. David and Sarah were forced to respond through their own hastily acquired lawyer. Their narrative of me having a breakdown and stealing from them fell apart when presented with the documented evidence of their actions and my clear, concise statements. Their lawyer quickly saw that pursuing a case against me for theft of the lottery ticket was risky, especially when faced with a counterclaim of financial exploitation backed by their own documents and my detailed account. The value of the ticket was significant, but the evidence of their planned long-term manipulation was damning. In the end, there was no dramatic courtroom showdown. Faced with the evidence and the certainty that the truth about their behavior would come out in court, potentially harming David's already precarious job prospects and their social standing, they agreed to a settlement. They formally withdrew any claims against me and the lottery winnings. They signed documents acknowledging my sole ownership of the ticket and its proceeds. Crucially, the settlement included a non-disparagement clause, preventing them from continuing to spread lies about me to family or friends, with significant financial penalties if they violated it. There was also a stipulation regarding no future contact unless initiated by me. In return, I did not pursue further legal action based on the financial exploitation I had already suffered, the smaller amounts they had taken, although the record of the settlement tacitly acknowledged their wrongdoing. The lottery money was leverage, not just for me to live on, but to ensure their silence and formal separation. The day the final papers were signed was quiet. I sat in Attorney Evans's office, the physical copies of the settlement agreement in my hand. It was over. I had secured my future, protected my assets, and formally severed ties with the people who had exploited my generosity and planned to take everything I had. There was no triumph, only a profound sense of relief and a deep, persistent sorrow for the family I had lost, not just now, but over the years as they drifted down this path. With the lottery money, I bought a small, comfortable condo in a different town. It was modest, but it was mine. I furnished it simply, with things I chose, in a space that felt safe and quiet. I changed my phone number, set up new routines. I started reconnecting with friends I had drifted away from while living with David and Sarah. I met some new people. The scar on my arm was a reminder of the trigger, the painful moment that forced me to see the truth. The lottery ticket, now just a piece of paper tucked away, was a symbol of the freedom and security it had afforded me. It hadn't been about revenge, despite their accusations. It had been about survival, about reclaiming my dignity and my right to feel safe in my own life, with my own resources. I never heard from David or Sarah directly again. The settlement ensured that. I heard snippets through the family grapevine, that they struggled financially, that their relationship was strained, that the truth about what happened had trickled out, damaging their reputation. I felt no satisfaction from their difficulties, only a quiet confirmation that my decision had been necessary. My grandson, Timmy, was the one enduring sadness. I hoped that someday, perhaps when he was older, he might understand, or at least, that the cycle of entitlement wouldn't continue with him. But for now, boundaries were necessary, even painful ones. My life now is peaceful, secure, and quiet. I manage my own finances, make my own decisions, and enjoy the simple independence I fought so hard to regain. The betrayal left scars, both visible and invisible, but it also forged a new strength. I learned that sometimes protecting yourself, even from your own family, is the most important act of self-love and preservation. It was a hard-won lesson, paid for with pain and sorrow, but the peace it brought was invaluable. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.